The show Health and Wellness with Vasούλα Χριστοδούλου is sponsored by Toyota Croydon. Get up to 10% off and 2 years free servicing on new cars when you quote Hellenic TV at Toyota Croydon. Book online today or call 0208 649 5919. Terms and conditions apply.
Αγαπητοί φίλοι και φίλες, καλησπέρα. Καλώς ορίσατε στην εκπομπή Υγεία και Ευεξία. Σήμερα θα μιλήσουμε για ένα πολύ ευαίσθητο θέμα και είναι για μία άλλη φάση της ζωής. Και πρόκειται για τους συνταξιούχους, για τις ανησυχίες, φοβίες και τη μεγάλη αλλαγή της ζωής. Μαζί μας είναι ο Michael James, τον οποίο γνωρίζετε πάρα πολύ και θα μοιραστεί μαζί μας τις δικές του εμπειρίες για να μας εμπνεύσει, αλλά και ίσως να μας δώσει δύναμη ότι όσοι βρίσκονται σε αυτή τη φάση δεν είναι μόνοι. Good evening, Michael. It's really nice to have you with us, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And the reason I chose you is because I know you are honest. And let me say that every good experience, that we are going to talk about, what your experiences is going to be to inspire others, or if it's anything difficult, again, it's to inspire others so that they will know they're not alone.
And it's always a pleasure to speak with you, Vasούλα, and I sincerely hope that I don't disappoint.
No, I'm sure you will not disappoint us. Thank you again. Right, Michael, before we say anything else, can you tell us a bit about your background? I know myself, but, to tell those who don't know.
Well, I think the Greek community in London are familiar with me in terms of the work which I did for London Greek Radio for some 17 years. I was providing a news in English, including sports, newspaper review, weather, all sorts of things. I've also done a fair amount of work within the Gopa League, helping with different magazines for the late Petros Michael. And generally been working in media. I've also done a fair amount of charity work and helped my wife, who's an accomplished artist who has been on Hellenic TV, as it happens, to organise her shows and to organise all the things that go with art exhibitions. So that's me in a nutshell. I also have a career before where I was a partner in a computer company and had a career before that in sales. So I've had quite a varied life, but of late I am now what you would call as retired or semi-retired.
So when did you actually retire, Michael?
Well, we moved from London in 2019, and the idea was to do some of the things that we'd been doing in London. But of course, when you're involved in people businesses and the pandemic hit, it was very difficult to continue what we'd set out to as basically a plan to see us through that initial period, because we had the move, the change of culture. It's completely different in the north of England to what it is in London. There are vast differences. And just to really adjust. But I think we had planned to be semi-retired, but what happened during COVID was that retirement became more permanent because of the rules and regulations that were imposed upon us.
So, Michael, let's talk about pre-retirement. How did you feel? I want to know your feelings. I mean, what went through your mind? I mean,
it's an interesting question. It's a very interesting question that you ask, and I doubt very much if very few people actually sit down and visualize what retirement may be. Now, of course, there's the financial aspect to this. People put money aside for pension, investments. They buy houses. They buy houses to rent out for financial security. But I don't believe too many people actually sit down and imagine in their minds what retirement will be like. And let's be fair about it. There's no official training, no official preparation for this. It's you work and then you stop working. So I don't think I ever sat down and thought what it would be like.
So you didn't make any preparations, like even when you were younger, you know, to have savings for your retirement? Or
as I say, yeah, financially, we ensured that we were relatively comfortable when we moved from London. But in terms of dealing with day-to-day retirement, I hadn't thought about it. And as I say, the pandemic, I don't want to keep going on about it, but the pandemic did accelerate the aspects of retirement which I hadn't really visualized. Now, I think retirement is different for every individual, Vasula. I think this is quite important. I think there will be those who, for whatever reason, have worked in uninteresting jobs that they've had to do just to earn money and maybe look forward to actually sitting around and doing nothing. Maybe that's something in their mind. Then there'll be those that are really very well off, who have been used to a life of leisure and are probably geared up with all the things that they may want to do, sailing, golfing, all of those things. Then there are those people, I think, that can't stop work. And I think, you know, some of the people I know in the Greek community who own restaurants and have done that for many, many years literally can't switch off. So although it's not a financial issue, they may find it difficult to actually stop working. So there are a number of categories which I think people fall into, and I think that's important to recognize. How those individuals deal with it, again, is an individual thing. But I would say, as far as I was concerned, it was a challenge.
Okay, yes. Because you moved from London up north, and also, as you said, the pandemic, which it wasn't easy. Apart from the fact that you couldn't do what you've planned to do, but we had the lockdowns, you couldn't see family and your daughter, your newborn grandchild, you know, so many things were going on. But can you tell us about the things you were looking forward to do?
Well, I'd done it. Just before lockdown, I'd set up some golf lessons, which I'd wanted to do for many, many years. I'd started swimming again. So I was going to the local bars. My wife and I had started to keep fit. I'd been writing some local articles for a newspaper. So we had some building blocks in place in terms of how we would work through our retirement so that we kept ourselves occupied. And Michelle was starting to do her art and doing some new pieces. But of course, in the pandemic, if you can't get a group of people together at an art gallery, you can't sell your art. So that wasn't possible. And as I say, it wasn't possible for me to go out and meet people. And therefore, what it meant was that my wife and I spent a lot of time together. Now, although we've been married for 34 years, You can be madly in love, you can be the most suited couple in the world, but you need your own space. And I think that was what we found, both of us found a little difficult, because we both had active lives in London. The change to Yorkshire was one thing, but it compounded by the effects of the pandemic.
So how do you tackle this? I mean, what did you do? Because I know you are a very strong person and you're trying to deal with all the problems you come across. And I know that you truly love your wife. So I'm sure that you took steps to make sure that everything was going to be okay, you know.
Well, we you know, I think you have to be honest with each other, and you have to understand that you can get on somebody else's nerves. It doesn't matter who you're with. If you're with them 24/7, it's a challenge. I mean, we tried to do some things. We made a huge mistake. We bought a jigsaw puzzle, which is not really something which suits either of us, and we lost a piece, and apparently my wife now admits that she dropped it in the spaghetti bolognese. So that caused a little bit of a dispute. But it was those kinds of things that we were looking to do. We'd previously gone on a lot of really nice walks, and we're spoilt for choice here in North Yorkshire. But again, of course, you were limited to how long you could go out. There was one point which you could only exercise for an hour. So you'd have to drive an hour to find somewhere to walk. And of course, that was against the law. So it was difficult. We overdosed on Netflix, as I imagine half the population did. So we've seen several series over and over again. But it was difficult. I mean, we had the joy of a grandchild, and we were in a support bubble because she at the time was under a year, which meant we could go and see our grandchild. But there are other aspects to retirement which I don't think people are prepared for. Now, I'm quite a traditionalist. I'm of that age where 40, 50 years ago, when you left school, you were brought up to go out and earn money and to work. And I did a lot of that in my life. And then to suddenly stop work was also a little difficult to deal with, because I think, you have to be honest about this, there was a sense of feeling a little useless for a time. Because when you've been a provider and when you've done all of those things, I think it's difficult to switch off. And as I said earlier, there's no training for this. And I think it may very well be different for men and women. I mean, there are so many more opportunities for women now in the workplace, but that wasn't the same for when Michelle started or when I started. We followed a different path to the way perhaps people in their 30s and their 40s do now. So I think that probably makes it a bit harder for our generation.
What about, DIY? Did you try to do any DIY?
That's not me. My wife's the DIY person. That's, if you want a good laugh, Vasula, watch me try and knock a nail in a wall. So that isn't something that I'm very good at. So that was a non-starter for me. I did a fair amount of reading, but I did feel not quite surplus to requirements, but it's a change of mentality that an individual has to get their head round. I really believe that. And I would, willingly talk to anybody that needed some guidance on this, because I think it's very, very difficult.
I fully understand, it's really and truly understandable. But have you noticed any changes within yourself, even physical and mentally, even putting on weight or getting moody, this kind of changes? Not
really putting on weight. We were able to keep ourselves fit. Moody, not so much, but just perhaps a little bit irritable with each other. But for me, the sense of feeling that I wasn't contributing. And this is an old-fashioned concept, Vasula. And this is why I'm saying it's probably applicable more to my generation. I'll give you an example. When we got married, I wasn't that wealthy, so I could only afford a certain standard of wedding ring for my wife. And I promised her at some point in the future I would upgrade it to a better ring. Of course, it took me 33 years to do this, but eventually she chose a ring, which was an antique ring. It was absolutely beautiful. And I bought the ring for her, and I said, it doesn't feel the same. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, back in the day, I'd go out and earn that money and feel really proud that I've put that ring on your finger. She said, yes, but the money you've used is money you earned 10, 15 years ago.
Exactly.
At the time, Vasula, it didn't feel the same as me going out and doing it. And that's part of the frustration.
But as Michelle said, you worked hard all these years. So, and you saved up, to upgrade that ring when it felt it's the right moment.
Yes, but it didn't help my esteem.
Yes.
It didn't help me up here.
Yes.
Of course, what Michelle says is right and logical, but it didn't satisfy my sense of needing to feel that I have achieved something immediately and then gone out and
yes.
not rewarded myself, but bought something for my wife.
Yes.
And that's part of the psychological defect in retirement. That's what I'm getting at.
Okay, let's talk about Michelle now a little bit.
Of course.
Have you heard about the retired husband syndrome symptoms?
Please enlighten me. I probably tick every box, Vasula, so go on.
And this is about the wife feeling having this syndrome,
Okay, go on.
So I was wondering if you think that Michelle is suffering from this syndrome. As you said, no matter how much in love you are with your partner, if it's like 24/7, it can become really tiring, and you need your space. And usually, although it's the men who fear initially the marriage and the fear about the space, they don't want to lose the space, etc. When when it's retirement time, then it's the wife who doesn't want the husband to be.
This is true, and I can refer to my own parents. Of course, we're going back another generation again, but my father had worked for 50 years, and he retired on the Friday. And on the Monday morning, my mother used to, again, old-fashioned standards, but my mother used to clean the house on a Monday morning. And she suddenly found my father sitting in the armchair with a newspaper. And it was a bit of a shock for both of them. So by the end of the week, she had asked him to go out to the park and go for a walk. So he had to find things to do. And for a few weeks, it was even after 50 years of marriage, it was a little strange because she was so used to him leaving at a certain time and coming home at a certain time. Now, from my point of view, one of the things that I think both of us missed is that when you're doing different things, what happens is that your topic of conversation is built around the things that you do in the day. But if you're both doing the same thing, i.e. looking at the TV or working in the garden, your subject material, Vasula, is quite limited. And I think that's one of the issues where we felt like we were repeating our own storylines all the time. And I think as a result of that, yes, you can go on each other's nerves, no doubt about it. From my wife's perspective, of course, they like to hear their husbands talking about different things and interesting things. So, yes, it must have been a bit difficult for her.
Yes, but she's coping okay.
She's fine. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be adaptable. We have to move forward. Yes. But I think we're naive and we're not being truthful with each other if we say that there were times when it was a little difficult.
Yes, absolutely. And I know that you're trying hard to keep that, the love and the care.
Spontaneity.
Yes, exactly. Because when it was like Valentine's Day, you had plans and you were so excited. Say, oh yes, I'm going to take my wife Michelle out for dinner, and we are going to. And I love the enthusiasm, that you. The way you express yourself, you were excited like a young boy, which was really...
Hey, I'm romantic. What do you mean? Plus, I like to live, because if I hadn't taken her out, she'd have probably really told me off. So there was a bit of self-protection in there as well. But yeah, it was nice. We went out, we had a really good time, and of course Valentine's Day fell on a Monday, which is very unusual for us to go out in the evening on a Monday, but we did, and it was really good. And I chose somewhere that was intimate and romantic, so it worked well for us, I think.
Excellent. So what is your day routine, Michael? Can you just give us an example?
Well, I like to get up relatively early, because I think there is a tendency for retired people, if you haven't got a reason to get up late. I don't think that's healthy in any way at all. As you know, I'm doing this news bulletin again for LGR, which makes me get up. Now that the COVID restrictions have been lifted, I'm doing, a fair amount of physical exercise, doing a lot of swimming, a lot of golf. We both of us go to the gym twice a week, my wife and I. We need to keep fit because we've got an overactive 14-month-old grandchild that almost determines that we need to be Olympians by standard to keep up with.
Up your stamina.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yes. No, that sounds great. What would you advise to other people, like to either retired or retired to be, people, because I like the way you look at life. You don't sit there and do nothing. You're trying to, if you do have a problem, you're trying to solve it, and make it better, which is great.
Try and have a plan, I think is essential. Some sort of organized routine that you force yourself to stick to. I think it's, as I say, it's very easy to fall into lackadaisical habits. Now, if an individual has a regular job, you know that you have to turn up at a certain time. So that's the mentality, that's the mindset that you need to adopt in retirement. You need to say, at 10 o'clock, I'm going out and I'm going to be doing ABC. And at lunchtime, I'm going to go and do something else. And in the afternoon, without it being too regimented, but I think you need a pattern and you need to be tough enough to stick to that. And if you're able to do that, then your life has a purpose. Because I do have friends that sit around and they get themselves depressed for no other reason that they just don't have some sort of structure to work towards. So that would be my advice. I would also say to try and do something that stimulates your mental capacity, because I think it's very easy, as I said to you earlier, if you're restricting what you're doing on a daily basis, your input in terms of life and experience is reduced, and therefore you slow down. Exactly. You slow down, and you. I even sensed this a bit of myself. You start to repeat yourself, just because there are no new experiences coming into your life. So I think that would be something that I would advise people to do. And to match your own personality. It's a bit like when people looking to go on a diet, for example, and they're really over-ambitious about this. I think what individuals need to do is to match what they know they can do without being overly ambitious. If I had said to you, I'm going to go and do a marathon, it wouldn't have happened because physically I'm not able to do it. Secondly, I would have been bored with it. And thirdly, I wouldn't be prepared to put the training in. But to spend half an hour, 40 minutes twice a week doing something that's quite entertaining and interesting is another story. So that's something I'd ask people to consider doing.
There is a quote, a Japanese quote, actually, and it says, if you don't use it, you lose it. And for sure, you won't lose it, Michael, because, you know, the things that you have mentioned that you are doing, you are very active and well done. You know, so it's good. Even our brain or our body, we need, you know, maybe we need to slow down a little bit, because it's good to give a rest to our body, to our brain, you know, but we shouldn't stop everything completely. Now, regarding illnesses, you know, about our physical problems, as we get older, it's normal, you know, that most of the people, they might start having, I don't know, you know, about yourself, or high blood pressure or other medical issues. And how do you find this? Do you look at it as, oh, I'm getting old? Or if you do have any, whatever issues you might have, or would you say that, okay, I have to deal with it. I have to try and make it better?
Look, I think we should try to be realistic and honest with ourselves. The clock doesn't stop moving. You know, we all get older. If we, you know, this is a fact of life, and by virtue of that fact, you slow down. You slow down. I know I can't do some things that I would have been able to do 20 years ago, physically and mentally. From a mental perspective, I was able to cope with a number of things at one time. I was able to juggle different business things without getting, should we say, stressed out. I'm not able to do that to the same standard these days. And I think that's part of the aging process. But I recognize that. I'm not going to take on too many projects that are going to make me feel unwell, which links into your question about health. So I think it's important to know one's limitations. Physically, before I retired, I had one or two health issues. Those haven't really deteriorated. But I know that my body's changed. For example, last week I fell over on the golf course. And I fell over on mud, fell over on my back. Now, 20 odd years ago, I'd have got up, shrugged it off, and it'd been fine. But it was sore and bruised, and the discomfort lasted for about a week or so, because it takes the body longer to recover. So I accept that. It sometimes irritates me, don't get me wrong, that I think, oh, why has this gone on longer than it did before? But I think we all have to recognize that we change. I think, funnily enough, as well, talking about retirement, I believe this sincerely. I think that women are much more capable of dealing with changes in their lives, because they have more changes than men have. I think, you know, we grow up, go to work, and then retire with all the things that ladies go through in terms of, you know, menstruation, having children, menopause, all those things. I think ladies are probably more capable of adapting than we are, specifically as well to retirement.
Yes, I think, you know, you're absolutely right, Michael. And one more thing about death. You know, when we reach an age, you know, then we hear more death, you know, people that we know, either in our family or friends, you know, which is part of life. How do you feel about it? Does it?
Well, look, you know, I've read the news for many years, and every day you pick up the news bulletins to go through what's effectively current news, there will be somebody that's passed away. And we had a young guy, Jamal, died at 31 yesterday, which was really, really tragic. But I look at ages and I see people with at the same age as me, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't affect me a little bit. But again, it's one of those things that we have to just learn to live with. And, you know, maybe I'm criticizing my own profession, but I think in the media, whenever we talk about individuals or individuals' achievement, it's always prefixed with an age. We say so-and-so sportsman, 62, has now retired, or so-and-so gold medal, 24. And we all make a judgment based on that number. And I think in some ways that's not particularly healthy, particularly with the preconceived concept that society has on different age groups.
Absolutely.
People say 25, they have a vision in mind, 55, something else, and 75, something else. So do I think about death, which is the answer to your question? I have thought about it more than I did before, but I'm not obsessive with it.
Yes. Yeah. It's normal to think about it, I believe, but as you said, not to be obsessive, because then we can get older quicker and depressed. And apparently, there was this research that they said people can even suffer with heart problems just because they get depressed because they retired or they are getting older. But I think it's a good idea to look at it as it's a privilege to get older, because as you've mentioned earlier on, you heard about deaths on the 30s or even younger. So if we grow old, that's a privilege. We should look at the positive side.
Well, of course, there's many things that older people can bring to the table. And experience is one of those things. Now, although, as I said, there will be the slowing down process, we have to consider, as I say, the experience value. And, you know, the great poet Oscar Wilde said, did he not, that experience is the name men give to their mistakes, which I think is apt, in the sense that if you've done many things in your life, inevitably you've made mistakes along the way. And I think being able to offer advice, I mean, people can listen or they can take it, that's their choice. But I think that's something which I think is a benefit. There used to be a kind of unwritten rule that all high court judges were over a certain age because they had that experience of life to be able to assess really quite difficult and sensitive situations. So there are benefits.
Yes.
Perhaps just seeing things from a different perspective.
Thank you so much, Michael, for sharing your own experience with us today. And as you said, acceptance is very important, and just walk, do something about it instead of feeling sorry about yourself. And well done, and we would like to hear from you again sometimes in the near.
Is that another invite?
Why not? It's a pleasure to have you.
Hey, you're a star. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
The show Health and Wellness with Vasούλα Χριστοδούλου is sponsored by Toyota Croydon. Get up to 10% off and 2 years free servicing on new cars when you quote Hellenic TV at Toyota Croydon.
Book online today or call 0208 649 5919. Terms and conditions apply.